because I forgot to last period, and yeah, that went on quite a ways. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, take out your notes. We're going to continue looking at the Russian situation, the Russian government. Yes, yes. With, of course, the idea that we're going to see you one more time this week, and then we got a break, and then we'll see you twice the week after break. Yes? We'll continue on, and then the week after that, actually, we'll see you 3 times, even though that's going to be kind of weird. I'll have to figure something out as far as, like, because I'm not going to see the green guys at all. Keep track of the presidential election. And did I get you one of those? I don't think I did I? Nope. Extra credit, opportunity. Okay. Oh, there we go. To make predictions based on some research of who is going to win in each of the various different states, or Nebraska and Maine in each of the different congressional districts. Okay? So, you'll want to have that in blue. Let me see. Blue is Election Day. So if you get that into me by Election Day, that should be fine. Don't give it to me afterwards. President Trump is back at the White House now. Okay? There is a vice presidential debate going on tonight. And they got plexiglass set up. Kamala Harris and Mike Pence are going to be having their debates. It's the only one debate that they have with the vice presidential candidates. So that'll be cool. And then we'll see what happens like next week. I can't remember which day of the week is scheduled for the second presidential debate. And then there'll be one more after that scheduled. So we'll see how that all works out. Okay? So we do that. We've got a democracy in our country. Yay. Yes? Oh, yeah. You want to get that. That's pretty straightforward. You're basically just writing the numbers and so forth. If you have any questions on how to do that, then ask me. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory, yes.
Where would I find the places to meet?
I don't think that should be too hard. I think it's going to be nationally televised. I can't remember exactly like which channel. Is it CNN or anyway? So, yeah, you should be able to watch that fairly easy tonight. Okay. Questions? I think that there's not going to be quite as many interruptions this time around. I just don't think that's going to happen. Okay? So we're continuing on looking at authoritarian government in Russia. Okay? So with respect to the powerful Russian leaders, we were talking about Peter the Great. What made him so great? How did he make his country more secure nationally against potential enemies? Who did he go to war against? It was right next to him. It was a little bit to the west. I'll give you a clue. Who did he go to war against? Sweden, exactly. Did he ultimately take land away from Sweden? Yes. Did he gain access to oceans? Yes, indirectly, the Baltic Sea. And he built, I don't think we mentioned the name of that city, did we? He built a new capital city. Make sure you write that down. Exactly. A brand new capital city on the shores of the Baltic Sea, where he's going to have shipbuilding, and he's going to have harbor, he's going to have trade, and he's going to name it after himself. It's called St. Petersburg. Now, when I went to St. Petersburg the very first time, this will be explained later on in this unit. When I went there, it wasn't named after Peter. I did see a statue of Peter, because they're like, hey, he was a tough, powerful Russian leader, even if he's not a communist. It was named after that guy. Look over there on the wall with the red and the mustache and the bald forehead. Yes, that is not Vladimir Putin. Then that is correct. It is Lenin, the founder of the Communist Party in Russia, the Soviet Union. And they named the city Leningrad. They had renamed it Leningrad. If you go there today, it's called St. Petersburg again. Okay? No, that's a different city. Leningrad. And we're going to get to, if you look at, let me see, yep, second bullet point from the very bottom of that sheet, Vladimir Lenin. When we get to that point, when we no longer have tsars, imperial rulers, absolute monarchs, we're going to have communist dictators.
He was thought to claim himself as a saint. He pronounced it.
There's a process by which they do that, but needless to say, he was pretty well recognized, not so much as a saint. I mean, it's interesting because you're like, did he do really saintly things? No, the more I tell you about Peter the Great, you're going to go, he doesn't sound like a saint. But, I mean, he is named after an early Christian leader of great importance, one of the disciples of Jesus named Peter. And so, I don't know. They're like, hey, we'll just call it Petersburg. We'll call it St. Petersburg. We'll call it after the saint way, way back when, even though he happens to have the same name as the Tsar. Okay? That city was built on swampland. And it is going to be very difficult in fact, they're going to have to build like canals here and there and all over the place and redirect the water so that you're not always having flooding and so forth. But it will be a great accomplishment. A lot of people die in the construction of it. But Peter's like, hey, whatever. This is all for the country, for the greatness, for the glory. Yes?
So, why was the name St. Petersburg after him if you don't have to use the name?
Peter the Great is Peter.
But I thought you said they named it after that.
No. Oh, when the communists came to power, they changed the name of the city. So when I visited there in 1985, yeah, they had changed it to Leningrad. And it's been Leningrad for like most of the 20th century. But they changed it back to St. Petersburg. I don't know, maybe the city you were born in someday will be named after you. They'll change it and so everyone, anyway, it is possible. Right? Right? I mean, like, does anyone know what important national city George Washington was born in? And it's not Washington, D.C. Actually, I'm not sure where he was born, somewhere in Virginia. Did they name it after him? Yes, they named it after him. Did they name the state of Washington after him? Yes, they did. George Washington was not born in Washington, D.C. No, he wasn't. He was born in Virginia. All right, but we're getting off track. We don't need to do that. So there we've got Peter the Great learning about industry, technology, making sure that his country is going to be educationally, technologically advanced. Because what happens if you're not technologically advanced as your neighboring countries? You can get attacked, and what are they going to attack you with? Ooh, wow, super high-tech weapons, at least for whatever time period that is. Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly the thing. You guys pick up on that. Those are basic things. If you pick up on those, so much of history makes so much more sense. It's like, let me see. Why did the United States so easily conquer lands that had been held for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years by Native Americans? Technology. Yeah, and disease. Yeah. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, disease actually killed lots and lots of them and so forth. But the higher technology and the numbers of people and so forth finished the deal. All right? Now, I did mention this, I believe, last time. This is one of those things that's kind of like, you get what you get. This is one of those things. You get what you get. In this country, we can look and we can vote among different people for president. And if, it looks like, I don't know, are we even having this debate so much this year? Like, who is going to be the toughest national security leader, Trump or Biden? Is that like the number one issue? I mean, a lot of it's like economy and other kinds of things come into it. I mean, do we expect to need a president that's going to be like out there fighting? Not so much. But in Russia, do you have this down? In Russia, so often in their history, they need their leaders to be tough militarily. And so when they find leaders that are tough militarily, sometimes they overlook some of those weird little things that you would look in normal circumstances and go, whoa. I mean, here's one for you. If there was somebody running for president and they killed their son, would you vote for him? Yeah. Okay. Ivan the Terrible killed his son, but it's like, yeah, but he beat the Kazans. Bottom line, national security guy. Peter the Great beat the Swedes. His thing is not quite as jarring as killing your son or some of those like rage things. His thing, though, is a cultural preference for the West. Did you have this in your notes last time? He prefers the West, as in Western Europe. He likes their technology, obviously, because he figures that's going to help his country out. But in his mind, it's almost like he's put those two together. The West has better technology, therefore, the West has a preferable culture. Now, when I mean culture, I mean hairstyle, clothing style, architectural style. Do the Russians have those styles too? They have styles that are Russian, right? You got your onion domes, you got your, and actually it's very practical. In Russia, you see a lot of really steep pitched roofs. What the heck is the value of a steep pitched roof? Yeah, people. He's worried about the people coming through. But I mean, the snow can't accumulate very well on the top, so you don't have so much snow on top of your roof that it's going to collapse. Was it this class that asked about like this building right here? Like, how is that in the snow, the Russian snows? This is a flat-roofed building. His palace, his winter palace, he's got two palaces. We'll talk about the one that he has just out in the out of the main city. And it's flat. I mean, I'll ask you guys. How do you remove snow when you get a lot of it accumulating on the top of a flat roof building?
Well, theoretically, you wouldn't have to because, like, there's not that much.
What, are you just going to stand up on the roof and go away, snow. Don't land on my roof. Yeah, get off my lawn.
Well, like where it is in the world, there's not much.
Oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's a lot of cold and snow up there.
I was looking down by the water.
Yeah, by the bottom, not so much. That's right. And actually, it's weird because they actually had Winter Olympic Games not that long ago in Russia, and it wasn't way up here. It was actually down here. And they did have a problem sometimes on the Black Sea with getting enough snow. But trust me, in St. Petersburg, they get a lot of snow in the wintertime, yes.
They have like students that have it. They have experience.
Oh, yeah, they're going to have people up there shoveling it off. Right, because it's like, you guys remember Snowmageddon that we had like in this area? Remember that?
No.
Where we had like no school.
Oh yeah.
That was like, what, 3 years ago or so? It's like you wake up early. Oh, no school. So then I go back to bed and then come out and shovel my driveway again. And there were buildings that collapsed in this area because they didn't get the snow shoveled off the roof, right? I mean, it was a hassle. So, very practical, some of the Russian things. Like, here we go. Russians like, the Russian men, especially like the noble men, they like the long beards. That's their style. Peter the Great's like, yeah, the Western Europeans don't have those long beards. Get this. Write this down. I don't know if people come along. I don't know. Do your parents do like Peter the Great did? You must have this style. Your styles that you prefer are wrong, and they evidence some flaw in your character. Have you ever had those conversations? Not yet? You're like, whatever you want me to wear, Mom, I'll wear it. How many guys are having a little bit of conversation now over like what is appropriate and so forth to wear? Well, here's the conversation with Papa Peter the Great. He would come along to people. Now he's the emperor, he's the czar. He would come along, look what he's doing. And it's actually kind of a goofy picture. It's like, what the heck? Those legs look weird. He would come along and he would grab the beards and cut them off. And also, write this down, he cut off the tails of the coats because they're like, those are unfashionable. They're too long. So, I mean, that's just like a kind of weird peccadillo thing of his cultural taste. And the Russians are like, whatever, we'll take that in the package. Just stay away from Peter and his scissors. Don't let him see you with your long beard or your long coat. Leave your coats in the closet because he won't like it. Yes?
So back to the palace, isn't that where they tried to kill Rasputin?
No. But it's during that time. We'll tell you about the story of Rasputin. That's coming up later. Okay? It was in the same city. And they did kill him. But not in that particular palace.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Tell me the first part first and then the second.
Did they name Ivan Drago after Ivan the...
Ivan is a very common Russian name. And so if you're going to have a character who is like Russian, Ivan and Vladimir are very often used that way. What's your second question?
Well, I was going to ask, did they also name Ivan from Iron Man 2 after...
Probably. Yeah, I mean, the Iron Man 2 guy is like a Russian, Eastern European character. Okay? Put this down. Peter the Great, one of the things he did, I mean, he went incognito, right? And he was like, observing, shipbuilding techniques and things like that. He also went as an official czar, and he visited palaces like the Palace of Versailles, which the French king had, very big and beautiful with lots of gardens. And he saw some other palaces, and he's like, we're Russia, we're great. I build big city, my new capital city. I build not one, but 2 big palaces. Write it down. 2 big palaces. And look at what the architectural style is. Does that look like traditional Russian, like onion dome or like steep pitch roof? That is European style. That's his main palace. That's the so-called Winter Palace. If you were to go to St. Petersburg today and visit it, you would see some really good art. It is an art museum now. When the czars were thrown out, eventually it was turned into an art museum. And they've got some really amazing works of art there. And in fact, in the basement, they've got some things that they don't bring out because it's like, did we actually have that? Oh, did we take that? Where did we get that from? Yes. Go ahead, quickly.
Going back to JT's discussion about, like, what happens when Peter leaves and, like, who walks in?
Oh, yes. He thinks he's got his loyal guard when he leaves Russia. If they're not quite as loyal, this is a sign of his toughness, his greatness. He is brutal. Yeah, he's brutal to them. Literally, there was like a rebellion of some of his loyal guard, and the rebels ended up like killed, and their bodies nailed to the wooden Kremlin wall outside of the palace. It made a clear message, didn't he? Don't mess with Pete. You got that? You tell him that. Yes. Now you can tell him that. Yeah. Yeah, this is, so like one of the things you often have like with big palaces is you don't have, it's not like you got like a normal road and sidewalks and all kinds of like, hassle for parking and so forth. This is the palace for the czar. And there's going to be a big, wide, open area. I mean, that's just what you get with palaces. Okay? Yeah, it's very good for social distancing, so there's plenty of room and so forth there. He also built one in the outlying area. Some of you guys might remember me talking about this last year. He built a separate summer palace outside of St. Petersburg. And there he could really spread out. So he's got the big palace, and he's got acres and acres of plant life and walkways and water and fountains. And he designs the fountains. This guy is smart. He designs the fountains. He figures out, because he's like, I want to know how the fountains work. And so he's like, I'm going to do this, and asking questions. And he designs it, but he's got a wicked sense of humor. You know this one, yes? Some of you guys remember this. I'll tell you. Go ahead. Yeah, you're telling it now. Yeah, okay, JT's going to tell this one. He actually did. So if you were invited to visit the Tsar in his summer palace, you'd get in your dressed fineries and so forth, and Peter the Great would be like, here, walk this way, walk this with the path, or you get the best of view. And so he's walking, you're walking along in your finest thing, and all of a sudden you step onto the trigger stone. And the trigger stone releases water at you from all angles. You don't expect it, you're drenched. And you're like in shock. And then you hear this loud, booming laughter. That's Peter the Great. And he's having a laugh at your expense. And you're like, they actually, when I went there in 1985, it was cool. It was the summertime. There were all kinds of like school trips and so forth. And this one particular area where the trigger stone was, there were all these little kids, and they were all running around, trying to step on the trigger stone, la 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 la, until somebody would finally step on it. Ah! And everyone would scream, and water would come at them from all over the place. And those of us who were like, cool, college-age students, we were like, we were laughing. And some of us would, of course, running in there too, because it was fun, right? That's Peter the Great's sense of humor. If that's the trick he pulls on you, consider yourself lucky. Because sometimes he would go, yeah, here, fill this up, like a gallon or 2 or 3 with vodka and say, you drink. Like, what? Really? He would do that to people too? Yes. So, don't mess with Pete. You want to be on his good side. Okay? Will Russia, after he's gone, will Russia continue keeping up with the West? That's the question. Write it down. Can Russia keep up with the West? Now, by keep up, I basically am referring to what Ava was talking about earlier. Can Russia keep up with the pace of technology and learning in technology and their economy? Sometimes the answer is da, which means yes in Russian. Sometimes the answer is niet, which means no in Russian. Got it? All right, so now we've got Peter the Great as a very good example of a tough, wicked sense of humor, but tough, authoritarian leader for Russia. Let's get to the next example. All right, some of you guys are like, oh, here comes another one. Which of these two is going to be the next example of a tough, autocratic, authoritarian ruler of Russia? Catherine, exactly. All right? So Catherine, you're like, what the heck? Let me go back here a little bit. Here we got Peter the Great, dies 1725, and then it goes through several various different people, and eventually it ends up, you're like, hey, we're going to name the kid Peter. That should be good. Hopefully it'll work. With a good name like Peter, that kid has got to be a good czar. Look at this, 1762, he's only czar for like 1 year. And then he's gone. And who takes his place? His wife. Let me tell you the story of Catherine, a.k.a. Catherine the Great. Now, she's got some interesting details. Some of you guys remember this because stories like Catherine's stick in your head. But here's the things I really want you to focus in on. Because people will look back later in Russia and go, yeah, she was good leader too. What made her good? She was tough. She conquered. She expanded Russia's boundaries. She didn't put up with any nonsense. She was a very tough woman who wasn't even born into the Russian royal family. Write this down. She married into the Russian royal family. Yeah, she spoke German. Yeah, the Germans, they had lots of different principalities and so forth. It wasn't all united as one big country like it is now or what it became in 1870. But she was from one of the German areas, and they made an arrangement for her to marry into the Russian royal family. How would you like to be like royalty back in the 1700s, and your papa comes to you and says, hey, you're going on a trip for the rest of your life. You're going to marry somebody you don't know about. And don't worry, he's been raised a pampered existence all of his life. Good luck with that. So she knew, moving into a new country, she didn't really speak Russian. She's going to pick up on it fairly quickly, that it was going to be a challenge for her. Yes?
Was Catherine the first woman ruler?
In Russia? I wouldn't say, no, she's not the first woman ruler in Russia. If you look at historically, there's a preference for guys. And sometimes it's like, they'll bend over backward to try and make sure that a guy ends up on the throne. But sometimes, like last year, my students heard me talk about Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, one of the strongest monarchs in British history. Right? They went with her younger brother first, because he's a boy, but he didn't last very long. And they went with their older sister. She was Bloody Mary. Anyway, but when Elizabeth gets on the throne, she's really, really good. It's not like she's going to come around and punch you in the face. She'll have other people do that. It's not like she's going to scream at you. No, she's very calm. Maybe you have people like that in your life. The quieter their voice is, the more you have to fear. Okay? Okay, so you're like, woo, images come to night, and you're like breaking out into a cold sweat. So sometimes you do have that. I would say nowadays, I don't know how many of you guys think, by show of hands, that a man is, because of his biology, going to be generally better than a woman at running a country. He's looking around. Okay, all right. And the number of hands that, how many guys would say, we'll try the other question too, how many guys would say that a woman, because of her biology, is going to be better at running the country than a man? Oh, you say both. Okay, I'm confused. Anyway, so, today it's a little bit kind of mixed, and who knows, maybe after the election we'll have our first female vice president ever in United States history, but we're not the first country to have top leaders as a female. Russia's had some experience, but you can put this down. The most important thing is to keep it in the royal family. Right? So that's why keep it in the royal family. All right, so that's why, for example, in Britain, we had Elizabeth. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII. They didn't go to some boy cousin or some whatever. It's like, keep it in the royal family. Although in Russia, it's kind of weird, because ultimately, the one who ended up in charge was not born into that family, but she proved herself. And she had a lot of support ultimately. Let me get to the story, okay? Let me get to the story, because whether it's male or female, what Russia looks for, because of all the challenges they've had, is toughness. They don't ever seem to get a long enough a break to let things like, love and protection of human rights and democracy and that sort of stuff develop. Even as it's developing more and more in the modern world in the last 100 years or even more in this part of in the United States. So, she marries. Some of you guys remember this part. Actually, let's see how well you remember. Raise your hand if you want to tell me something about her husband, Peter. Yes? He was really bad at ruling. Very good. Her husband was really bad at ruling. He was weak. He was not seen. He was not sized up as being what Russia needed. Okay? And the ones who are really noticing this are like the next line of authority, the nobles in Russia. They're always kind of checking to see, all right, if we've got a good, strong czar, that helps the country. We need a good, strong czar. I mean, it's a hassle because they might come along and cut your beard off or something like that. But they notice that Peter's very weak. Okay? Raise your hand if you can tell me. Oh, question. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, we're going to get to the kill part. Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But yeah, he going to be dead. Yeah. So raise your hand if you can tell me something maybe you remember about the relationship he has with his new German wife. I didn't even tell you this, so go for it. Yeah, they didn't really like each other. It just didn't work. It wasn't that sort of like, oh, we're going to make this work and kids and the next generation and so forth. He wanted to put her into a convent. Write that down. He wanted to put her into a convent. He basically sort of was like, I'll be czar, but I don't want this woman. I'm not really interested in her. I'm just going to pack her up and send her over into a Russian Orthodox convent. So here's this German woman. I believe she was probably Catholic. I'm not positive about that. But she wasn't Russian Orthodox. She had to convert to join into the family. And now he's going to pack her up and have her spend the rest of her life in a convent. And she was not interested in that at all. She did not like her husband very well. And she really hated him after that. Of course, the nobles sized her up as having some qualities that were pretty tough. And so some key nobles at a key point in time said, let's do this. They killed him, and they put her in authority. She never remarried. I mean, I suppose maybe they could have. It would have been complicated. But I suppose, kind of like with Queen Elizabeth of England, maybe the idea is just like, look, if I'm the monarch, I'm in charge, then I don't have to have a husband bossing me around or trying to boss me around and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There she is, Catherine the Great. She will rule for many years in Russia, and she's going to be very, very tough. Now, there were some people, get this, there were some people who are like, we shouldn't have a woman as a leader. That shows weakness of Russia as a leader to have a woman. Women are weaker than men. Women should be subservient to men. I mean, that's what some of the attitude had been around in Russia for a long time. I told one of the classes, and they were like, what? In Russia, for many, many years, a wedding gift from father to new son-in-law. Father's daughter marries the son-in-law, and the father gives his new son-in-law a stick to hit her with. Exactly. You've heard this. Yeah, it's like, whoa! This is not the father who says, oh, my little darling, don't touch her. No, this is the father who says, oh, my little darling, you better train her. What? So you would actually get, let me back this up, you would get some people, this is a cartoon of the time. If you knew a lot about it and you're like, analyzed it very carefully, after a while you go, that is crude. Okay, that is crude. If Catherine saw who did this cartoon, she'd be all over him. Write this down. She did not put up with critical commentary against her at all. So she fits very much into that tough authoritarian leader. And they're making all kinds of criticisms of her that she is expanding her territory. And we'll talk about that because we're going to see she is going to expand her territory. But here it looks like she's expanding her legs. And they're looking up under her legs and making comments. You can't really read them because it's all written very small, but it's very crude. If Catherine were to actually see that in your hand, she'd go, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of your life is now going to leave you. Yeah, yes.
Besides killing her husband, did she ever do any, like, really cool things with the other prisoners?
She put down rebellion. There's some key things there, and I'm sure if you actually did sort of like a really in-depth study of her life, you could find some things that are really cool. So like a rebel leader. You know, some people are like, oh, she's a woman. Let's have a rebellion. They had a big, massive peasant rebellion in Russia while she was ruling. She put it down ruthlessly. Okay, and so some of you guys would be like, oh, well, they deserved it and whatever. And, you know, I mean, she's not just going to pick somebody off the street and go, I'm just going to torture you to death. No. But if you oppose her, yeah, this woman can thump you. And the nobles, a lot of them respected it. And that's why, I mean, it's the Russians who refer to her in the past tense as the Great. She was great. The wives, if they tried that, they wouldn't necessarily have the courts helping them out. So that's why it's always interesting because, I mean, did Catherine, was she able to? I mean, she may have had an interest in doing that, but I don't know. But was she able to change that completely in Russian society? No. It will change over time, right? Just like if you look at other societies and so forth, you get those changes over time. But here is this is credit to a foreigner, non-Russian, and a woman, and non-royal. She's not even part of that original family, and yet she gets the job done. She holds on to power. She asserts herself as a very, very powerful ruler. And one of the ways she did it, here we go. She expanded the territory. There we go. You can see that in the bullet point there for Catherine the Great. Ruler 1762 to 1796, right? So that's what, 34 years? That's a pretty good stretch. I mean, if you were to go back 34 years, that would put us like, in Ronald Reagan's time. You're like, whoa, that was a long time ago. That's a long stretch for an absolute ruler. She went to war with the Ottoman Empire. So this territory to the south, she went to war with the Turks, and she defeated them to a degree and took on some new territory, right? Let's see if you can figure out this. She takes on new territory, and it's the northern shore of the Black Sea. If she could, or later Russian leaders could, how far, take a look over this map. Let's see, here's Russia, here's the Black Sea. How far do you suppose they might like to control? Any volunteers on that one? Yeah? Like all the way over the Atlantic? Yeah. In fact, the goal was, it actually is referred to right here, Constantinople. Her goal might have been to defeat the Ottoman Empire entirely, take over their capital city, it's called Istanbul by that time, not Constantinople, and then have access to the Mediterranean Sea. That's a really good warm water port as compared to the St. Petersburg on the Baltic Sea. If they could, write that down. One of the Russian goals is to gain access to control of that opening into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, good luck trying to control all the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, who can do that? The Roman Empire can do that, I suppose. But at least if you get access to the Mediterranean Sea, then you can shoot the gap through the Straits of Gibraltar, and you can head out into the Atlantic Ocean. So that would be another Russian access to the ocean. You got that? That's one of the goals. She accomplishes it partly in that they take over an area called Crimea. You can write that one down. That's a very interesting area. Crimea on the northern shores of the Black Sea. Is there a river flowing through Crimea? Crimea River? Just kidding. Okay. Yeah. There'll be a war in Crimea later on. But I mean, literally, sometimes people are like, well, Russia should have access to the Indian Ocean, too. I mean, there were Russians that are like, we should have access to the Indian Ocean. Good luck with that. You got to go through Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan. And, that's never going to happen. But it looked like maybe Catherine the Great started the ball rolling on expanding Russian territory maybe into the Mediterranean. Keep that in your memory, because that's going to come up later on in a subsequent war. Okay? So what do we got with Catherine the Great? Tough, powerful. What's her, I don't know, does she have any like little foible or weird thing? She doesn't like men with beards or something? I don't know. She does like men, and she did have men who she was close to and intimate with, but she didn't like marry any of them. And so when people were talking about like her relationships and her love life and so forth, and so, they had to be very careful about it, because if she caught wind of their criticism, yeah, you got the motion down. Okay, all right. Are we ready for the next? Yes, let's go to the next one. All right. We'll move the clock up a little bit here to the time of Alexander. Let's see if we can, I'm going to go back through here just a little bit. So here we had Catherine the Great. We're going to skip one, Paul, who ruled after she was gone for like 5 years. And now we're going to go to Alexander. You can write down his years, 1801 to 1825. Okay? The critical 19th century, the 1800s. Yes? I don't know. Her heart stopped. I'm not sure. But I think she lived a fairly long life, okay, as those things go. I don't know all the details about her, but I tell you what, if you ever like, I want to do research. Junior year, you start the IB program, you pick your topic, you do research. I actually had one student graduated last year, did their historical research, their IA, I believe it was, comparing Ivan the Terrible and Joseph Stalin. I think it was Joseph Stalin, or was it? No, actually it was Nicholas II, who was a weaker leader, but two Russian leaders, two Russian czars. Okay? Get into and go into the details. I mean, that's the cool thing about history. You can go bounce, 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 and every once in a while you see something you really are interested in, just like dive into it. It's cool. Yes?
According to this, he died at 57.
Sounds fairly normal. Okay? All right. I mean, not, it's not good, but it's not like, oh, she was attacked by rabid dogs. Some of her opponents might have appreciated that, but some of her opponents maybe were attacked by rabid dogs. All right, so here we go. Alexander I, Tsar of Russia. Who's going to be his big challenge? Napoleon. Ooh, we learned about Napoleon last year, too, a little bit, too. Remember that? Yes.
Didn't Napoleon refer to Omo Island?
Yeah, that's the one. It didn't work out so well for Napoleon. Okay? He ended up spending the rest of his life on an island, like right here in the southern part of the Atlantic Ocean. He didn't escape from there. Okay? He didn't escape. But some of you guys, let's look into this. The challenge for Alexander I, the all-powerful Russian Tsar, is once again going to be national security. His country is going to be invaded by one of the most successful military leaders in European history, Napoleon. I'll give you the quick background on Napoleon. Napoleon came to power in France by the end of the 1700s, and in the early 1800s, he was at war with all kinds of parts of Europe. Remember? How'd that go? Who was able to stop him in those early years? No one. Yeah, very good. No one. I mean, pretty much the only country that was still sort of in a position of like not begging for mercy and so forth from Napoleon was Britain. What protected Britain from Napoleon's great armies? Exactly, the Navy, the water, the Navy on the water, and the separation. Does Russia have that same protection against Napoleon's armies? No. Napoleon's armies had defeated Austria and the Italian states and German states. I mean, they were in control of most of Europe. And Napoleon's like, now Russia. Write it down. Napoleon attacks Russia.
Wait, why did they attack them?
Why not? Because you can take them over. What the heck? I'm Napoleon. I know how to fight. I know how to win. I'm undefeated, right? Nothing can stop me. Nothing. No one has been as great of a military leader in all of European history except for God. You have to go all the way back to like Charlemagne. That's a long time ago. Here's Napoleon. He's feeling pretty confident. And he looks over to Russia and he goes, I think I can take them. I don't think they're modern enough. I think they're kind of backward. I'm not impressed with those European-style buildings or those European-style haircuts. I think I can take them. This is going to be a good question. Is Russia going to be able to keep up to the West? Will their leader be able to lead them into victory? All right, here we go. 1812. Boom, write it down. 1812. A massive French army. Look at this map. It's actually interesting because I think I've shown this to you as well, like in the 9th grade, because I like this one. This map shows you by the thickness, the red thickness, is the size of Napoleon's army when it enters into Russian territory. Here's the goal. Here's the objective. It's not the capital city, but it's a very important city in Russia still, Moscow. Right? Napoleon's objective is to take Moscow. The capital city was up in St. Petersburg. So Napoleon goes charging into Russia. He's like, I'm going to take Moscow. I'm going to grab the flag. I'm going to declare victory. And poor Alexander, sucker, he should just let me have it. I'm going to beat him. That's the goal. Okay? Napoleon figures he's going to be able to beat him. Some of you guys remember this. So, in the early battles between Napoleon's forces and the Russian forces, how did it go? Janet, do you remember? Eventually. In the early battles, some of you guys remember, what was Alexander's tactic of fighting? Yes? To move his troops by not fighting. Write that down. His way of surviving was not fighting. It's kind of like, remember George Washington in the American Revolution? I mean, he was always like, shoot, shoot, run away. Shoot, shoot, run away. Got to keep the army alive. And that's what the Russians did. Alexander looked and he's like, man, that's a big army. I'm going to retreat. I'm going to pull back. Raise your hand if you can remember. What else was Alexander I doing as he was pulling back into Russia? Why would he burn stuff? Exactly. So one of the things that people did in those days, is it time? They would burn the fields of all the usable crops and everything, and then the army that took it over got nothing. So we'll continue with Napoleon and Alexander, and this is Napoleon leaving Russia. Very sad. He's a loser, and he's going to end up stuck on an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And Russia is going to be victorious. Hail Alexander. We'll tell more of that story next time, okay? Eventually, they will use some of those kinds of tactics. When the French are weakened, so like this, we'll come back to this chart right here. The black line going from Moscow backwards is the size of Napoleon's army as they're retreating. So they lose a lot going in, and they lose even more coming out. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. What do I have to do?